Good morning, welcome to GAR, and we're so pleased that you're here. Do we have any of our affiliates here? I know Mindy's here, I saw Steve here, Alan's here. Just raise your hands because you guys are amazing. You do a lot for our members. Let's give our affiliate a big round of applause. And don't forget to shake them down. They need a shakedown every once in a while. But morning, we've got some great material for you today. Morgan Canaday Henson, right? Okay. It's hyphenated, not complicated. Is going to be your MC, but I just wanted to introduce her and thank you, Morgan, for all your tireless effort here at GAR. She does an awful lot, she and her mother both, and we appreciate your efforts on our behalf. But we've got a great panel, as you can see, lined up. I don't want to take too much time, but I did want to make a few announcements in addition to welcoming you here to GAR. First of all, a new development at GAR. I want to introduce Kelly Tinnen. Come on up, Kelly, for just a minute. She's going to tell you about a new and exciting program called the GAR Ambassador Program. And I don't want to steal her thunder, but Kelly has come on as our training administrator, and she'll be doing both in-house and in-office training. So if you or your QB would ever like Kelly to line up some type of training on our products, the MLS, the products and services, other things that we offer here at GAR, Kelly would be the contact for that. But I'm just going to let her kick that off real quick and invite you. Who likes free lunch? All right, I'll let her tell you about it. Here you go, Kelly.
Thanks, Kent. So I'm really excited to be here. I've been with GAR about 2 weeks now. I was going to joke and say I've been in real estate for about 2 weeks, but there's too many of you in the room that know me, and so that just wouldn't have worked. So anyways, you guys have a flyer on your table, and I want to introduce to you an ambassador program we're going to be rolling out on the 16th. And so I would love for you guys, if you're interested, to join me on the 16th. We're going to have lunch, and we're going to kick off this program. What it is it's aimed at helping you guys, the membership. It is going to be aimed at basically creating a liaison between your brokerages and GAR. We would like to hear your feedback on what training you guys may need, resources that your offices may need in order to help you with your business and better serve you guys. So I can't obviously do my job alone, and so you guys are going to be the ears out there on the road and letting me know what you need. And so I would look forward to seeing you guys on the 16th. Please join me, just RSVP. My email is on the sheet, Kelly@GAR. I'm really easy to find, so I look forward to seeing everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly. We are really excited about this program. I just think it's called the GAR Ambassador Program, and we're just kind of going with gap, because there's a gap in sometimes in communications, and sometimes I just don't feel it's appropriate for us to tell you what you need. You guys need to tell us what we need to do for you. And this is a great opportunity to be able to do that at a very high level. And Kelly's great. She's been a trainer. She's been a realtor for 11 years.
About 10 years.
10 years. She's been a QB, and she understands both sides of the business now. So I'm going to recruit for a minute. We want you. This is another flyer on your desk. We really do rely on volunteers to get the job done. This is a member-centered organization, not a staff-driven organization. And we want to make sure that you have a chance. If you ever had a desire to be on the board of directors with GAR or Southwest MLS, this is a great opportunity. Nominations are starting. It's a real quick online application process, and we'll get your name in the hopper. GAR Bowl-a-thon. We raise about $10,000 a year with the GAR Bowl-a-thon, just under, not quite, but just under $10,000 a year with the GAR Bowl-a-thon that goes to the Realtor Fund. Another project that Morgan and Chris are heavily involved in, and many of you as well have been contributors and participants in the golf tournament, in the GAR Gala Awards Gala, and now the Bowl-a-thon again. So Steve, you're involved with the Bowl-a-thon as well, aren't you?
Yeah. So I'm going to be hitting everybody up, just so you know. We want to break our record this year, get some money into that realtor fund for We'll have some Title I kids there. We'll feed them some lunch and let them bowl. And we're going to have 3 sessions, costume type party. That'll be in October, so come on out. We'll have some midnight bowling going on, prizes for costumes, giveaways. And so come out and join us. Sponsor if you can, but
Is it really midnight? You could be bowling at midnight?
it'll be midnight all day.
Go to bed before
All day. Yeah, well, if we catch you sleeping, we'll come and wake you up.
When it's your turn, right? So, yeah, bowling's fun. It's actually making a comeback. My wife is on a league now, and she has a ball with it. So that wasn't a pun, by the way. Okay, so we've got your back. There's another flyer here. We've got your back. We've done a pretty good job of hitting some pretty high numbers with this project. I don't think we have 500 yet, but we would like to be able to come up with 500 backpacks for Title I homeless kids so that when they go back to school, they've got a backpack full of everything they need. And this is a project that the random president, Victoria Murphy, cited as her #1 pet project. Mindy's been very involved with that, assembling these backpacks, as has Alan and many other people and our staff here at GAR. Important program because these kids otherwise go to school behind the 8 ball from day one, and that's a horrible place to be, and a bad spot to feel like everybody else has got something on the ball and you don't, and that's how these kids feel if they don't have what they need. So I would ask you to think about helping us with that. You can give us a check, or you can fill up a backpack with the needed supplies and go ahead and bring that on down here to GAR and add it to the stack of backpacks we have are they still in the Sandia room? Yeah, so you can stop by and see what we've done so far and get an idea of what we need. Thank you very much for your attention on that. I want to take one more minute. I know our panelists are chomping at the bit to get going, and I'm going to be getting the hook if I don't get off here soon. But Morgan, could you run this for us, and I'll explain in just a minute how it came about.
New Mexico True and your local realtors are proud to present our new, innovative, and most advanced real estate app for New Mexico properties. You'll be able to stay up to date with thousands of current listings across New Mexico. Find homes nearby, browse through listings in your area with our map feature, or customize your search with the essential information you're looking for. Your dream home is just a few clicks away with our comprehensive search options that are tailored to meet the needs of buyers and sellers in every region of this beautiful state. Browse through home features, amenities, photos, and more, all from your Apple or Android device. Whether you're looking to settle down in southern, central, or northern New Mexico, your journey starts here at NewMexicoHomesearch.com.
That's great.
Isn't that neat? I want to give Gabe a big hand for that because Gabe put that together. And Gabe, you'll probably never see his face in front of the camera because he's always behind the camera, but he does some fantastic work. He's a videographer, and I mean, he makes us all look good, even when we don't. Now, Kara, on the other hand, always looks good and does a great job on some. She's one of our GAR actresses, if you will. Morgan's been there too. We've got a pool of actors and actresses that help us with our videos, and you'll see more videos from GAR as time goes on because we've got some real talent here.
That app's going to be available when?
That app is available now. You can download it as we speak, and in fact, most people tell you to leave your phones off in meetings. I'm going to tell you turn it on and download that app. So New Mexico Home Search, the way it came about was back when Michael and Janice were here, and we really felt like we needed a way to not compete with Zillow, but sort of level the playing field. You know, it's our data, and they're our clients, and you know, we do a good job of keeping the data pure and the integrity of the data and all that sort of thing. And so they set out on this mission to build a statewide consumer-facing website, which is what NewMexicoHomesearch.com is. It even got better when New Mexico True stepped up to the plate and said, why don't you leverage the brand New Mexico True with your website And in fact, we'll just give you our regions, and we'll allow people to search region by region. And you know as well as I do, Farmington's way different from Lordsburg or Hobbs or Mora, or pick a spot. I've traveled the state as a candidate. I got a chance to go around the state and learn a little bit about every community in the state, and they're all very different heartbeat in every one of them. So we want to highlight that on NewMexicoHomeSearch.com with local content, regionally specific content, and content that's relevant to that region. And so that's what the website does, and we'll have 3 million views this year or more, maybe a lot more. As of today, we probably have over 90% of all realtors in the state represented on the site, because we just signed up with Santa Fe, and so Santa Fe's not online yet, but they will be very soon. Yes, ma'am.
So is there a cooperation agreement with these other brokers, or we have to establish that once we contact?
We have a cooperation agreement. It's a data agreement is all it is, and they can get out of it anytime they want to. But we also have an advisory group that's been formed. Voting members are the participants. Anybody, we want everybody to show up if they'd like to. But we have 4 meetings a year with that advisory group, and that's who runs NewMexicoHomeSearch.com. Is the participants.
Does it define Albuquerque's separate neighborhoods as well?
You can search pretty much as you would with any search engine, any real estate search engine. It searches pretty much the same. It doesn't go into areas, I don't believe. I might be wrong about that, Julian. You might.
You can type in search and it'll pull it.
Okay, so try it out and see if you like it. Sure. Can we brand it and share it? I don't know if we're branding right now, but it may be coming. We're looking at some changes. Sharing should be there already. So anyway, exciting stuff. There's lots of stuff going on, and I'm gonna get off of here and turn this over to Morgan. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you, Morgan, for doing this.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.
Real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Black sweater,
Thank you all so much for coming today. These quarterly forums are put on by our LEAP committee here at GAR, and we try and make the content as valuable and pertinent as possible. We found a need for this forum with the market that we're in right now. A lot of buyers are writing offers prior to doing the due diligence that they may have done a couple years ago, in fear that they're going to lose out if they waste any more time. So we just wanted to walk you through some best practices and pitfalls that you can coach your clients through and prep them for before they even become a big problem. We have a pretty awesome panel here for you today. Grant Blankenship is a pretty incredible contractor. Grant was born and raised in the Albuquerque metro area. He's lived in Cedar Crest for 35 of his 41 years and has been a general contractor for all of his working career, including a construction manager for D.R. Horton in Albuquerque and Lubbock, Texas. He works alongside his father in their family-owned construction business. Grant was also a realtor in 2009 to 2015, so understands many sides of our business. Justin Armstrong with Abraxas Electric down on the far end. At a young age, Justin started working in construction and became fascinated with electricity. He became a licensed electrician in 2006. The following year, he started Abraxas Electric, which he has built into a multi-million-dollar commercial and residential electric business. Johnny Bryant with ACEPH Plumbing. Johnny is a third-generation master plumber in Albuquerque. He started working for his father's plumbing company at the tender age of 12. In 2004, he opened his own company, ACEPH, which stands for Air Conditioning, Electrical, Plumbing, and Heating. He does both commercial and residential projects as well. He previously worked as an inspector for the city of Rio Rancho and also serves as an expert witness and consultant for plumbing and mechanical lawsuits. Johnny's wife, Trish, is a realtor, so he has a perspective that many don't and is able to understand many of the challenges we as realtors face. And last but not least, GAR's very own Jeff Bratton. Jeff, in total, has worked at GAR for well over a decade now in the MLS and compliance department. He has also worked as a licensed realtor and transaction coordinator, which gives him a unique and deep understanding of our MLS system and the rules and best practices associated with that. So, there we go. All right, first we're going to start with the top 5 pitfalls during inspections. When we first started organizing this forum, we surveyed several inspectors and realtors to try and get a better sense of what everyone as a whole is seeing as the major problems currently being faced through the inspection discovery process. The first one is previous remodel work not being done properly. Grant, can you speak to this?
One of the things you're going to see coming out of a tough market is a lot of people doing stuff themselves. Jobs lost, money's tight, and so all of a sudden everybody's doing their own thing. Let me burst your bubble a little bit, then I'll be nice. Raise your hand. You've been in here. If you've been in the business more than 10 years, raise your hand. Okay, less than 10 years, raise your hand. It's almost 50-50. So one of the problems that you have when you're dealing with work that's done improperly, you get it on the inspection, is perhaps you hear a little bit of panic in an inspector's voice. Oh, this is all done wrong. This house is going to fall down. You feel like, it's a horrible place to be. But you got to be careful, because I know as a realtor, your clients are responding to your body language and your reaction. And so picture you going to the doctor, and the doctor's all broken out in hives, and he's like freaking out, and he's like, I got to tell you something, you got a cold. So yes, there are issues with work that's done improperly, but you got to relax a little bit and figure out what improperly is. Because improperly could be like, my favorite was this. My favorite was the outdoor patio something or other that was filled in. They called it living space because there's like a space heater screwed to the wall or something like that. Those are the kinds that I love the most. That doesn't necessarily mean that the world's going to end. It's just not done like the way we would have it. So the question you have to ask as a realtor is this really a deal-killing issue, or can I get them just a free covered patio because it's not really technically living space? So you want to look at it as a realtor as much as you do the contractor, and don't necessarily take the tone that it's set in as matter of fact. We all have jobs to do, and we all know inspectors are wanting to make sure that they're worth their money, and so they're going to point things out. That's what they do. But we can react in a different, we can react in a calm manner, and that will help a lot in terms of people. The second thing that I was asked a lot, you guys probably hear this, can we do this, can we do that? Can this be fixed? Can we do that, change this? Can that be put back together? Can. And one of the best answers you guys can offer everybody is yes. Answer yes to everything. Can that be done? Yes. We can burn the house down and start over. Anything can be done. Anything can be fixed. Anything can be redone. It's just a matter of reading your clients and knowing, is this something they're going to want to do? Is this something that they want, that they're going to be able to do? Some people are pushing the limit on their financing. So I would say previously remodel work done improperly, you really got to look at it and ask yourself, what is done improperly? Another big one that I've heard a lot on is code issues. This isn't up to code. That wasn't done to code. One of the first questions you have to ask yourself, or the inspector for that matter, some of them know, is what code? Is this not done to today's code, and you're down in the South Valley or a Moss home that was built in the 50s? Well, of course it's not done to code. There are a lot of things like that that you have to ask. So if you relax and just ask some questions about what improperly really means, you might be able to provide a better response, a more educated, calm response.
Great. Thank you, Grant. The second issue that a lot of people are having issues with right now is electrical issues. Justin, can you speak to that a little bit?
I'd like to piggyback on the code issue, because that's usually what what comes up in the electrical inspections is this isn't to code, but there have been codes written year after year. Our code cycle is a 3-year cycle. So every 3 years, somebody comes up with something better, some better way of doing it, some different material that typically costs more money, or somebody can sell something, or the codes are intended, our code is intended to decrease or eliminate fire hazards. It's a fire code. So at its core, it's supposed to keep everything safer in respect to fire. In reality, a lot of times what's written into the code is who's lobbied the hardest to get their arc fault breakers, for example, into the code, or what type of wire has been manufactured. It's the newest and best thing. We run into a lot of oil and cloth wiring. I know you all have seen that or heard that come up. That was to code when it was put in. That was the latest and greatest thing. Now it seems a little ridiculous to put something that's flammable next to electricity in the wall, but it was to code, and so it's really unfair to say that this isn't built to code. So I think the biggest thing is reasonability, like Grant was talking about. That's or Federal Pacific panels, or any panels that have been outlawed. There's reasons why they've been outlawed. Knob and tube is another one that we run into all the time, where we're not allowed to touch it. It's been, it's got a big stigma about it. These panels, but when they were installed, they were the best thing, So if it's working, oftentimes, and it's been working, especially for years and years, oftentimes it's probably not a safety issue. It may be if you look at something and it looks obviously like it's sparking, or it's, you can tell by reasonability that it's a safe or an unsafe condition. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that when an inspector comes up with something that's not to code, I think the biggest question to ask your customer is, do you feel safe the way this is installed? Not what is the inspector saying is current code, but do you feel safe with this? And body language goes a long way, because we've all seen, I'm trying to think of an example where, we've seen over and over again the same installs that have been perfectly safe and perfectly fine, but this customer who's in kind of a raw moment, some of them, especially if it's a first time home purchase, or even if they've just been in a couple homes, it's a raw moment. It's a big investment. It's a lot of money either coming in or going out. And so the biggest thing for us is to put them at ease with these issues that come up from the inspectors.
Justin, can you also briefly talk about aluminum wiring and when that's a concern and how to handle that?
What kind of wiring?
Aluminum.
Aluminum. So here's the deal. A couple of things that come up. Here's the issues that are involved. Aluminum wiring it contracts and expands at a greater rate than copper. So really, we're dealing with hot and cold issues. So when when the connection is made typically with a screw terminal, so that screw doesn't move, and if the wire contracts and expands, it can create an arcing condition where electricity will jump, electrons will try to jump and get to ground. That's essentially what they're trying to do. So I would say pigtailing, or the other thing that can happen if it's a grounding aluminum issue, which oftentimes if you've got aluminum wiring, sometimes there's a grounding issue that comes up too. You can put GFCI receptacles in the wall, and that creates a safe condition for the customer, and it also gives you the benefit of pigtail, because you're obviously going into that box and pigtailing. So that's really your issue, is the hot and cold. It is something I think that's worth doing. I don't think you need to rewire the whole house necessarily, because if it's, so aluminum will break easier too, that hot and cold condition. But in a wall, unless the mice are in their jumping rope with the aluminum wire, it's not going to be moving very much. So that contraction expansion is not necessarily an issue on straight wire. The issue is at the connections, in the panels or at the receptacle.
I have,
Okay.
so, previous code allowed conduit to be your grounding.
Correct.
So we have these young inspectors that are coming into our industry, which doesn't know the old code, only knows maybe a code. So I've had issues where they're saying now you're not built to code because the house is on conduit, which is better than what they're doing nowadays, in my opinion. But that was the grounding, how they grounded the system. What is your opinion on that?
The reason that it's that we're going to a wired grounding system is that because of the years and years of remodels. So when it's, a lot of times it's easier to cut that pipe and put some Romex, plastic Romex from here to there. So that's the issue. The issue is not the mechanics of the grounding on the pipe. That works just fine. In fact, sometimes better, because it's electricity is trying to get to earth. So if that pipe touches dirt or something, it's a good grounding system. The problem is if that pipe gets cut, then you've lost your grounding system, which grounds are a second. Electricity is going to go back on the neutral. That's what it wants to do. If there's a problem with that, it'll go back on the ground before it goes through us or our pets or our electronics. So the other issue that comes up is if there's no ground, don't be tricked into thinking you can put it's a metal oxide varistor. It's the surge protector. That won't work without a ground. GFCIs will work without a ground. Surge protectors will not work.
The third thing that we're seeing a lot of issues with is plumbing issues, primarily with Kitech plumbing and polybutylene and replums not done properly. Johnny, can you speak to that a little bit?
Okay, so everybody knows, I'm sure everybody is familiar with poly. And that's been around a long time, probably mid-70s, mid-90s. And then Kitech came out in the mid-90s, up to about 2007. So the problem with it is with the poly, there was a lot of problems with the fittings and then some with the pipe. And the same thing happened with Kitech. Right now we're finding the biggest problem we're having with Kitech is, and that's a weird word, is de-zinkification. De-zinkification. So what's happening where the fitting is, the pipe is it's a layer of plastic with a layer of aluminum and a layer of plastic. So the fitting is touching the aluminum and it's causing basically a corrosion. So they have come out with a fix for that. How well it is, it's kind of a newer fix where you take the fitting off and they have one with a seal. So you're able to put a sealing surface on the fitting and that's supposed to stop the problem. Obviously we don't know how well that works because it's something fairly new.
We see a lot of issues with sonotubing and sonotubing failing. Can you kind of explain what that is, why it fails, and what the options are when that happens?
Okay, sonotube was basically a cardboard pipe that was put under slab. And when it was installed, it's like with any pipe, even if you're using metal, it's supposed to have 2 inches of concrete encased around it. Mm-hmm. So obviously these pipes are failing. Some of it's due to moisture from evaporated coolers. The majority of it is the pre-pour around the pipe was done improperly. So that's allowing the soil to sit on the tubing and rot the tubing out. And once the tubing gets rotted out, your choices are very limited. There are some companies out there that can put in a spray liner, depending on how far the damage has been on the pipe. A lot of times you have to go in these houses and figure out another way to put in another heating and cooling system.
What's a spray liner?
It's basically a hard plastic. Some companies go in there, they run a kind of a cable with nozzles on it. They pull through the duct and they seal it.
And I've been told, and Johnny, you can tell me if this is true or not, 99% of the time that's not a permanent solution. That's more of a temporary Band-Aid on a problem that's going to
Most of the
come back.
companies are offering anywhere between a 5 and 10-year warranty on it.
Okay.
So yeah, it is a temporary solution.
And again, that's something to explain to your clients as well. It's typically half the price of reducting in the attic or finding another solution. So explaining that to your clients that they're already halfway to getting new ductwork and that's a permanent solution. So definitely encourage that second option.
What about pouring concrete in that vacancy? I've seen plumbers off of that, where the tube was worn out because it's laying on dirt. Now they pour concrete in there, and now they're using just the vacant space as their heat source. Have you heard of that?
No, if you fill the tube up, you do fill, if you're doing if you go in and you figure out another way to run a system overhead in the attic or whatever, you do take all the boots, you do fill all that with concrete. But filling up a duct with concrete, you can lose it. What happens, if it turns out to be one area, and after it's been cambered, you find one bad area, there's always the option of just going in there and opening up the floor and repairing that area. But as far as filling with concrete, I've not heard of that.
Not filling, it just goes in and fills the bottom, so you still have the ductwork above, with all the rest of the part.
So you're talking about going in and pouring yourself a lever and they're just trying to fix the bottom. To me, it seems like a temporary repair.
Chris?
So, Johnny, what about a ductless system? When you have a collapsed ductwork, what about filling that duct and then putting in like a ductless LG system? Do you see that much now?
There is a lot more of that happening now. The thing with ductless systems is that they are pricey, and a lot of people do not like that. They work very well. You do have to figure out means in the house to run line sets and high drain lines. So that's a lot of times if people go that route, you need to get a contractor involved so they can open up walls for you and come in and do repairs. They're great systems. They work well. They're pricey, and there's a lot involved with them. But that is pretty much a permanent solution once they're installed.
Are they more pricey than jackhammering the floor?
Yes, they are.
What is a ductless system?
When you say open the walls?
Open the walls. You have I don't know if you've seen them, some of these houses. You'll see they can be a ceiling cassette or a head unit. Typically, they're about 12 inches tall, probably 3 foot wide. Stick out of the wall about 6 inches. But they create condensate when they're operating, so they have to have drains on them. So you have two choices. You drain them outside somehow, or you can put a pump in it and drain it outside. And then they have a line set going to it. It's a refrigerated system.
What does it look like? That's what she's asking. What does it look like? What's the ductless system look like?
They're just a head unit, so you'll see. I wish we had a picture. So it looks like something like up there on the top of the screen, only about 30 inches long.
Imagine like a baseboard heater or something, put it up high.
That's a good way to do it.
And we will be doing a Q&A section at the end, guys, so if you wouldn't mind trying to hold your questions as much as possible, just so we can make sure we have enough time to get through the whole presentation. Anything else on that, John?
No, that's it.
The fifth big problem that we're seeing is sewer line problems. And I'm going to pass this off to Johnny as well, just the big issues that you're seeing with that and why.
Well, the biggest issue with sewer line problems is obviously now a lot more people and realtors are having the lines checked. So, and it's getting called out oftentimes of being, there's different materials out there. There's Orangeburg, and any of these you probably have heard of, plate tile, transite. Of course, we have our plastics. The biggest problem that I've been seeing with these is the connections at some of the older piping has had roots that has infiltrated into the pipe. So, and most of these, the piping is solid, it's just at the connection. So if you have a sewer cleaning done in them and then keep up with that, your customers can go a long time without any issues, without having replaced. It's getting called out that lines need to be replaced. That's not necessarily true. If the piping's good and you have small intrusions in some of the joints, you can just do yearly or a couple yearly maintenance on them and be fine. Another problem is when the pipe's collapsing, such as Orangeburg. When you start having collapsing problems, it obviously has to be replaced, and that's where you have to figure out the best and the most convenient way to replace lines. So that's really pretty much it with the...
Yeah, definitely. And I would also say, I know a lot of realtors only really encourage their buyers to get sewer line inspections when they're down in the valley or in areas where there are well-established trees. We recently had a situation where Comcast had bored their cable line through this sewer line in this house, and it would have gone completely undetected if our seller, or I'm sorry, if our buyer didn't get it inspected.
You can see the sewer on TV then, right?
And that was in an area that was completely almost near new construction, so no big trees. They didn't think there was going to be an issue with collapsing sewer lines from aged pipes. So I would say no matter the location, no matter the age of the home, that's definitely an inspection worth doing. That cost Comcast over $10,000 to repair. So it's worth looking into, for sure.
I think one of the biggest thing is right away when it comes to sewer lines, everybody has an instant panic. They find a root in it or something, there's an instant panic on it, and the clients are panicked, a lot of times realtors panic, and it turns out where it's really not that big of an issue, where it's something, and a lot of times you could go down in certain areas and just repair that area, and it's not a whole sewer line. So that's something to keep aware.
Absolutely. So next we're going to go into the top 5 best practices. So essentially the ways that if faced with these pitfalls, how to best go about, I guess, avoiding them to where they're not avoiding, but being educated to where they don't become such a problem. The first one is to get documentation for all of the work done by the current owner. So as Grant was speaking to earlier, a lot of people in previous years, in an attempt to cut costs, did work themselves. If it's a major structural issue or something like that, it's important that it was permitted and done properly. Grant, do you kind of want to speak to the importance of that and when it's a concern?
Documentation is an interesting thing because you kind of have to know what's being documented. Otherwise, it's just information on a piece of paper. Like you could have documentation that this house had new Kitech plumbing put in it, and that doesn't mean anything because it's going to corrode. So right. You want to be careful. Documentation does not mean good. I'll put it that way. You could have documentation that a contractor came and worked on the house, and you could talk to somebody, a plumber or a mechanical guy, and they'll say that documentation isn't worth the paper it's written on. So documentation, you got to ask what exactly is being documented. It doesn't solve anything. However, the documentation can help you at least ask the right questions. So when you see a document that says they had a remodel done, and you see documents about a contract or whatever, of what work was done, that can help you ask, all right, was there anything done to the plumbing? Was there anything done to the HVAC? Was there anything done to the electrical? And that might at least give you the ability to tell your homeowner, do you want to check some of this out further? You could get I'm a contractor. So people are going to have a document they could give you that says the house was remodeled, but it's not going to tell you so many details about all the electrical work that was done, all the plumbing work that was done. It's just going to say installed new bathroom. That's what it says on the contract. So documentation is good because it can get you better educated on what questions to ask. Of course, without documentation, which is the whole point of improperly work done, they're not going to have it. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, yeah, definitely. Just the fact that before even listing the house, ask them if they've had work done so that you can ask those follow-up questions that 99% of buyers are going to want to know anyway. Chris?
So for me, documentation means the work has been inspected by the city. If the seller claims that it has been and they don't have that documentation, is there an easy way for us to obtain that?
That's very simple. You can do it as easy as online. I don't know about you guys. I think their website is horribly complicated. But if you want to little bit of brain trauma, you can actually go to whatever municipality it is and look it up online. They have all those online. Or a simple phone call with an address, and it's not a difficult thing to look up. You just have to know what inspection you're looking for.
Can I add to that? Go ahead. Okay, to add to what you said, that's correct. You want to have the local jurisdiction do inspections on that. Okay, in the process of doing that, there will be tags handed out. There'll be, depending on what it is, if a gas line is going to be on the gas line. If it's in a plumbing and a top out stage or final stage, there will be tags. So, and most of them, jurisdictions are trying to come up with a common area, so it'll be in the washer box. So documentation, have your clients, if you're doing a remodel, take pictures of it. It'll have the address, date, and time, or not time, but the date on it and what it was for. So there's ways to document it. As Grant was saying, as far as getting a website and trying to find it, anybody here can go to any jurisdiction's website and look at it, but get prepared to follow something that's really difficult to follow. None of them have been able to figure out how to make it simple. So,
But a phone call.
but the documentation, if somebody has documentation that they've done a remodel, unless they have it doesn't mean anything, as Grant was saying. What means something is having all your local jurisdiction inspections. That lets you know that it's had to go through a process to be done properly.
Great.
So if it's not done properly, how difficult is it to get it permitted? Even though it might be built pretty good, how difficult is it to get permitted in Denver?
Well, I would say, I have to answer these questions kind of relatively, because I would say that's not a problem. But obviously it can be complicated if you're not doing it every day. The permitting of something that's already been done would depend on the complexity of what's been done.
Of course.
Yeah.
Take a covered patio enclosed now, doesn't have proper footers and all that stuff.
That's something like a covered patio would not be complicated. They would want to see the footers, which you can show them by digging a small hole right in front of the patio. They might want to see some bolting and some structural things, but the issue with that is going to be they're going to want to see stuff up front. You don't ask them to come out and tell you that it's okay. You have to tell them this is what it is, and then they tell you that's okay. So you'd have to tell them structural issues, weight bearing stuff, and then they would tell you that's okay. They're not going to come and figure that out for you.
Okay.
I think an important thing to look at is it going to be readily available or visible after the fact? So if it's in the wall, it's probably a good idea to get it inspected, because you don't want your customer to have to go back and tear that wall out if something should ever come up. And I'm going to go a little bit against the grain here. Inspections are an important piece of paper in certain situations. And I think it's important to note that ultimately your tradesman, your journeyman, or your contractor is ultimately responsible, liable for that work. The jurisdiction is not liable for that work. So I think the important documentation you should probably look for is who did that work, especially in this small town where we know who's who and who's been here and who's done what. Inspections are important in most cases, and I'm obliged to say everything needs to be inspected. But I think more importantly, the ultimate responsible party is the person that's doing that work. So that's more important to note than anything. If you can get an invoice from the contractor that did that work, I think that's worth more than seeing an inspection tag.
Yes, ma'am.
Shouldn't the contractor pull the permits prior to starting the work?
That would be best case scenario.
In a perfect world.
Yes, they should. It doesnn't happen that way all the time. Or you could have a whole project where certain trades pull. So, okay, let me explain this a little clearer. You have an electrical permit, you have a plumbing permit, okay, you have a building permit, you have an HVAC permit, you have all kinds of different permits attached to, especially an existing house. So it's possible that some of it was permitted and some of it was not. I could remodel a house, the structure of it myself, and not pull a permit on it if it wasn't visible from the street or something, and then they could come back later and do plumbing and electrical and pull permits on it. So theoretically, that's the way you want it to be done. It doesn't necessarily always happen that way.
It's our responsibility to ask the contractor, would you please get permits from all of the other contractors?
Homeowner should do that definitely. Anybody who's not willing to permit their work, say goodbye.
Yes, ma'am.
Back to how to resolve
Oh, go ahead.
how to resolve an issue of well, this is East Mountains. I confirmed with the county that it was not permitted. There was a two-story addition on the back of the house, and then a new roof later. There's no permits and records whatsoever. We're talking about inspections. Is that an inspection by a licensed contractor, or is there city inspectors, or how do you resolve that?
A municipal inspection. And unfortunately, this is not as uncommon as it sounds. I'd say unfortunately, that's become a large part of our business, is going in and helping these poor homeowners who have a house that's halfway built. They've already blown their budget and they find out it wasn't permitted or something like that. People who have done these big remodels and things, and then they try to sell it and there's no documentation. It's a complicated thing, and I can't say that it's not inexpensive. It can be very expensive.
So the municipal inspector, there's no charge for that?
Yeah, there's permit fees, but you're buying a house, so they're relatively insignificant.
If you're the listing broker, strongly encourage your seller to do a pre-listing inspection. Again, in this market, you want, when buyers aren't doing that much due diligence prior to writing the offer, it's important to try and solve as many problems before going under contract. So, Grant, do you want to speak to that a little bit as well?
Just real briefly, that's an awesome thing to do, because you guys know more often than not, there are certain times that big issues freak out a buyer. But more often than not, it's when the inspection comes in and you drop a ream of paper in front of them and says, okay, we got a few problems. And when in reality, most of the problems that come up on an inspection, 90% of the problems that come up on an inspection every single time might take an hour and a half to fix. You know, screw this little screw in, tighten that little thing, have the plumber come out and do a little this and a little that. They're relatively simple. If you can get in a pre-listing inspection so that when the buyer comes in and you've taken care of all of those little things and there's a few things on there, even if they're big, it's still just going to be easier to present because it's just not that many items. That's hugely helpful because it's totally a psychology thing.
Definitely.
I want to make a statement in reference to that, though. You know, a lot of sellers have known, because we've done net outs for them, and we're telling them, well, the buyer's going to want you to pay for an inspection, even though we think they should pay, but they're going to want you to pay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. And then, so you're trying to get seller to pay for a pre-listing inspection, and then yet we all know that the buyer might want to come in and bring their own inspector in.
What's the cost of a pre-listing inspection nowadays? $150, $200?
No, $300.
Raise the price of the house $250.
Well, and I would say what we usually do in that situation, Peggy, is I'll counter back and say, look, we already had this inspection done. If you want someone else to come inspect, then that's at your cost.
That's what I do, but I just kind of wanted to open up, because everybody kind of doing that. I've just had trouble getting sellers to do the pre-listing inspections, even though I think it's a really great idea.
So one thing that I would do as a realtor is it's a matter of presenting something with confidence. Do you think maybe we could do a pre-listing inspection? No, this is how I sell houses. We're going to do a pre-listing inspection. That will be done on this date. It's going to cost this much. You'll have very few customers that are going to look back at you and say, no, you sell it just like you sell everything else. You don't ask the customer if they want their house on every single website. That's technically a choice.
Yeah, as Grant was saying, just present it with confidence. I'll just say, my job is to sell your house. The easiest way and smoothest way to do that is to know what problems we're going to face at the forefront. So we're going to do this pre-listing inspection, figure out what the problems are, and solve as many as we can up front.
Okay, one thing you need to remember, a lot of times on these inspections, when they come back from the inspector out there, They'll call it out, and we're back to the code issues and what year it is and what they're calling out. A lot of things that are calling on inspections are not necessary to do, and it's a real simple letter from your electrician, your builder, your plumber. They write a letter, it overrides what they're saying. So there's a lot of times when these things get called out, everybody's panicking on them, and it's not necessarily need to be done or corrected. So that's something to also remember.
What are the legal ramifications for the seller down below? They have to disclose a lot of things that may not be an issue if they have pre-inspection.
Well, none of us are lawyers, but I would say, obviously over disclose, I always present the pre-listing inspection to potential buyers and say, this is the inspection, this is the work that's been completed based on the inspection report. Mindy?
Obviously, I'm not a realtor, but these are conversations that I have with all my clients because she's a brilliant stager, thank you. But when you are, the only time the seller has control of the transaction is before it goes on the market. Mm-hmm. Once it hits the market, it's a buyer's game and the buyers are in control. Remember too that the inspectors that you hire, make sure you call somebody that offers and follow-up inspection free as part of the package. So you can get the work assessed by them. After the work's done, they will come back with the same price, because that's part of the package if you get the right inspector, and re-inspect that and document that. Mm-hmm. So I just think it's an important conversation, and I've always said to them, you're paying for it anyway. Mm-hmm. You're going to pay now or later. If you can stay in control of the deal, you're going to read more at the end, because at the end, you may have a price, they're going to come start knocking everything off. Even if you have large issues that come up, if you can stay ahead of the objections, we're not going to do these, but we have 3 bids for you and we've adjusted our price accordingly. Mm-hmm. Or whatever you have to do to stay ahead of the objections, you're always, I think, ahead of the game. Getting a qualified inspector and qualified people to do it.
Absolutely. Trish?
Can I revisit Justin's point?
You bet.
He touched on something really important that I think we as an industry have to be respectful of and aware of. We obviously, in Johnny's shop, there are electricians and contractors. These guys are in our lives 24/7, may I say, 24/7. So, I do hear a lot of their grumblings. And one thing that they are more than happy to serve our community. But when we call, we freak out. Oh my God, it's knob and tube. The world is going to stop turning. You need to get out there right now. Well, our urgency is not necessarily theirs. So number one, pick an electrician, a plumber, a contractor that you know and you trust, and stick with them. Don't shop them every single time you get a transaction, because then when you're really on fire, they're not as apt to pay attention as if you've used them on every transaction before that. And secondly, respect their time, especially with electricians and plumbers. I know that it's urgent. To us, it's very urgent. And of course, it's urgent to them too, but they have other jobs to do. And I think we have to be respectful of that. Thanks, Justin, for addressing that.
You're welcome. Getting back to the pre-listing, so it is a psychological game, and if something comes up on the pre-listing that we can come back and on a letterhead form saying it's not a big deal, if it comes up again, at least we're not in a defensive mode. We've already addressed that. We already said it's not a big deal without any kind of gamesmanship involved. So that, I think, getting that stuff out in the air in the beginning.
The way I used to explain it to people, to put maybe Johnny's words into realtor speak, is if you don't get a pre-listing and I get an inspection as a buyer of a whole bunch of things, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to get you to drop the price of the house more because there's so many items on the list, and I'll take care of it later, than it would actually cost to just fix the house.
So number 3 on the list is kind of the reverse of that. If you're the selling broker, encourage your buyers to fully inspect the house. There's copious amounts of inspections available to buyers now. Things that we've already touched on, like the sewer line and the duct. radon, mold, infrared thermal inspections for radiant heat. It is worth a few $100s now to where your buyer knows everything that they could possibly know about that house up front. Not only does it take liability off of you as a realtor, but if they know everything that they need to know about that house and they're confident, they're going to want to refer you to all of their family and friends. So it's worth having that tough conversation of, hey, I know it's $125 for a sewer line inspection, but it's worth the tens of thousands of dollars that a problem that goes undiscovered could possibly be. Grant, is there anything that you want to touch on as far as that goes? Kind of the same.
I'm not even sure why that's a question.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, you want to really make your homeowners happy? Get the sewer to back up a day or two after they move in. They'll love you forever. I mean, this is kind of, if you're not having the buyers fully inspect the house, you're asking for it.
My love, would you like to address the sewer line issue?
Morgan, the one thing I was going to say on
Yeah.
this particular topic is make sure your buyers are agreeing to do those inspections because they also think it's a sound, wise investment. But they have to understand it's their investment. Because what if they do find something major and there is not a meeting in line between the seller and the buyer on that repair or that money or something else and the deal falls? They have to understand if they agree to pay for that inspection and the deal doesn't come together, they paid for the inspection. That was their, basically their insurance policy to know they're not buying a house that is not the one they want to buy or has a problem, et cetera. Because they, oftentimes those complaints come back to me for standards or conflict resolution because they want to be reimbursed then by the seller when they agree to pay for the inspection.
Definitely. So for those of you that don't know, Melody is the one that gets all of the ethics calls and complaints here at GAR, and she sees a lot of these issues that may seem like common sense all too frequently. And I think just taking the time to fully educate your buyer on their options and the consequences of those options is super important. Yes.
I truly agree with a full inspection for the resale house. My question is, what will be your advice if clients would prefer newly constructed house and we would say, oh, we have the inspection, we have like this and like that? Would you advise us that get it inspected buyers? Do your
Always. Always. It doesn't matter if the house has got a CO yesterday. Always, always, always. Even if it's just sleep for me is worth a lot. Even if I can just get an inspection so I can sleep better. A brand new house has the potential to have as many issues as an older house. It's just maybe they're different issues. It's always better that way, especially as a realtor, to not get an inspection on a new house. It's a matter it's a matter of time before something happens. I would say on the new inspections or the full house, the buyer's inspections, the one thing you got to be careful of is to present it in the light that an inspection does not ensure perfection. Just because they didn't find it doesn't mean that it's not there. You're trying to give them options to cross as many things off the list as they can, but they're still buying a house. It's just like any other house you own. There's going to be little this, little that. There could be surprises. It's possible. We're going to do our best to eliminate them, but because we got a full home inspection doesn't mean a week later after they close something pops up that you promised there wouldn't be any problems. It's the encouraging them that you're trying to eliminate those things, but you're never going to be able to completely.
And you can always get inspections from people that are actually licensed in that particular item. So if something looks like it's a plumbing issue, you can get a licensed plumber to come do that inspection.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say that if you inspect everything that could be inspected, you're not talking a few hundred, you could be talking a few thousand.
Absolutely, but that I would argue that first. She was more making a comment. She said that if you inspect everything that's possibly available to get inspected, it's not going to be a few $100s. It could be a couple thousand. And I would argue that that couple thousand even is well worth the potential nightmare of tens or even worst case scenario, hundreds of thousands of dollars of issues. So it's worth having that tough conversation with your clients. The fourth best practice is to verify the age of the mechanics, roof, etc., before marketing it as new or newer. I oftentimes will see in the property remarks, newer heater, and then when the inspections come around, it's actually
3 years ago.
or even worse, 5-10 years ago. So I would encourage that, especially with sellers that have been in the house for a long time, what might feel like a couple years ago to them was actually 2005. So before you market that as such, which sounds silly, but I've had 3 transactions in the last 2 months where something was marketed like this. Jeff, do you kind of want to talk about the liability of that and putting it in MLS without having?
Certainly. I've done a little bit of research the last week on your own inventory here of the use of new and newer. So at the point when you're listing it and going into marketing remarks, you may or may not have verified this information. It may have been passed along verbally, or you've just maybe going, hopefully not off the old listing, but you've maybe done your diligence. But when it comes down to it, use of the term new and newer you need to be mindful of how you're using that. You're not going to necessarily get a call from me or compliance MLS because it's not, what I would call inaccurate data, or we could verify it maybe off public or tax record. But some examples I can share are one of my favorites. Advertising is a newer roof in the marketing remarks, and I look at the seller's disclosure as just to verify a source, and it says 3 years old there. So I can't tell you what a time frame, what new is. I can't say it's 3 months, 6 months, a year. But I've seen a lot of examples, and in my review, some a little bit better than others. One where they'll say new roof, and they'll say done 1 year ago, or new AC, 1 year old. So they may have done a little bit more. That's a little different than just saying newer carpet, new roof. But again, if it was done in 2011, is that really new or newer? So that's the thing. So just be mindful and careful of those remarks. It could potentially lead down the road to liability facing in court, or having to speak in front of the commission. So,
Trish?
Johnny, could you please address not the legal age, but the ideal age of a water heater and a furnace, and how often we have inspectors call out that it's past its
useful life
expectancy, and you've got one single person living in the house, and they've been there for a year.
Okay, well, it's hard to say how long a water heater is going to last. The industry standard for water heater and furnaces is 10 years, have your customer replace them. If you have a one member living in a home, and the water heater is 9 years old, 8 years old, and they're calling out as older water heaters should be replaced, that's not necessarily true. None of us have a crystal ball and know when something's going to go bad. You have to look at a lot of items. The area it's in, the water. In the East Mountains, a lot of people up there are lucky if they could get 4 or 5 years out of a water heater, just due to the water up there. So this is addressed. It's getting called out oftentimes. It's getting called out that the water heater is 10 years old. You go look on the date on it, and it turns out that the water heater is 6 years old. So there is some confusion on some of the serial numbers and looking at the dates and when it's getting called out. The same thing's happening with the furnace. It's wise to have an 80 plus or better furnace in your home just for efficiency ratings. But there's a lot of homes out there. We have several that we service every year. The furnaces were installed in the 60s. They work great. You can't convince the customer to change them. You're telling them this thing is like 48% efficient. You ought to get rid of it. It's as long as I've been servicing this, you could have already paid for your new furnace. So obvious things. Cracked fireboxes, issues with the furnace. But for them to be getting called out, a lot of times I've seen on some of Trish's report, furnace is 10 years old, should be replaced. That's not true. The furnace is 10 years old and it's working fine, and so there is an issue there, and it's getting called out on some of these inspections where it's not necessarily true need to be. I mean, if you replace your stuff every few years, are you better off? I don't know. It just there is a standard where things are improving and things are getting better and getting more efficient. But in the last 10 years on the furnaces, an 80% furnace 10 years ago is as efficient as an 80% furnace today.
You just said something very important that I just thought of. If an inspector on any one of my inspections ever gave advice on what to do, I sent it back and told them to erase it. I don't want you to tell me what to do. I want the information, and they'll do it because they know they're not supposed to do it. They just can't help themselves. And so they'll say, roof is 20 years old, should be replaced. I sent that back and say, should be replaced off of it. All I want to know is it's 20 years old.
I wish I could do that with all the home inspectors.
That's what I'm saying. I did that. I talked about the home inspectors. I would send it back and say, take it off. And they'll know that, especially if you get further up the line, because that can cause a lot of problems.
And kind of going off what Grant just said, I try and be present at all of my full home inspections to prevent inspectors from making comments like that, because they're not an expert in that field. They're an expert at inspecting. If they say the electrical is a fire hazard, I'm going to call Justin and say, can you please come evaluate this, meet with these buyers, and give your opinion as a licensed electrician on this, because they know a lot more than an inspector, even if that inspector tries to present it as if he is the expert in that field. And then finally, number 5, be aware of pitfalls common to that specific area of town or age of home. Yes, it will prevent having pitfalls and big problems later, but it also makes you look like the expert. And that's how you're going to get referral business from that client. So I just kind of wanted to touch on a few of the major ones. Johnny, I know you touched on it earlier, but if you want to go over where poly is common, where Kitech's common, where sonotube.
Okay, well, a lot of things. When somebody calls me and say, I have a question about a house, one of the first questions you ask is, where's the house? You get over to, Nob Hill area, pretty much all the sewer lines over there are going to be clay tile or Orangeburg. So you already know what you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. As far as poly was really popular in Rio Rancho. Mm-hmm. You find more poly homes in Rio Rancho than you will anywhere else. We've done some repipes. Actually, the first repipes that happened in Albuquerque, I was working for my father, we did them there. And the first ones that we did was actually up of Eubanks by San Francisco area. Okay. So it spread out. At that time, it was, when a new product comes out, it's up to the plumber. And I'm sure electrician, when any new products come out, it's up to the contractor, plumber, electrician to decide if they're going to use them or not. I take most of them as snake bite oil. I won't try them right away until they've been around for a while. So you're going to find more poly in Rio Rancho than you will anywhere else. But you have to be aware that it can be in any home from, approximately mid-70s, 74 on. If the house is built in, you do need to have it checked to see that if it has poly in it or not. And then, of course, Kitech was, started in the 90s. So we know that there was a boom. There's a lot of houses built in. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of plumbers using it for the ease and the convenience of installing it. And and they're spread out all over. There's a lot of that in Rio Rancho.
On the west side.
On the west side, there's a lot of areas that have the poly Kitech installed.
And what about sonotubing?
What? Yeah, Tanawan. Sonotube is pretty much sprouted everywhere, but we see more of it up in the Northeast Heights than we do in anywhere else, because it seems like that was a time period when the houses were going in and the sonotube was popular.
And that's where groundwater is.
And
Northeast Heights is where you have groundwater. Mm-hmm. Northeast Heights, you buy a home that has a basement, you need to know there's a strong chance there's groundwater up against that basement wall. There's a layer of clay that runs underneath that decomposed granite. All the water off the mountain, water from the landscaping, it goes down about 6 to 10 feet. It hits this layer of clay and it just runs all the way to the river. I built a basement in Quintessence off of Academy and Eubank, and when we dug the hole, there's a clear line right across, and the water is just cascading out of this line. So part of your duct problem in the Northeast Heights is the groundwater problem in the Northeast Heights.
Mm-hmm. So it's more of a time frame, I think, that I've noticed for us than it is a location area, because they come up with different codes and different products to match those codes per time period than they do. So we'll see knob and tube from the 50s and 60s all across the city It really depends when they were building. So Rio Rancho, obviously, there's not much knob and tube out there because it wasn't even thought of at that point. So I think for us, it's more of a time period. Any homes before the 90s, you're going to see aluminum wiring. Aluminum was more based on economics than it was functionality of it. When copper's really expensive, they allow the aluminum. Oh, it's just fine now, and then when copper comes down, they put copper back in the walls. I think honestly, I think the bigger issue, more than wiring for us, electrically speaking, is the recalled panels. Because ultimately, I would never recommend this, but I can go grab, depending how I'm grounded, depending the context of the situation, I can go grab electricity and it's not going to hurt me or it's not going to hurt somebody. If there's a problem in a wall or there's a problem with the circuiting or some fly-by-night or some homeowner or somebody came in and did the wiring wrong and it's even potentially a dangerous situation, ultimately that circuit is going to go back to its protective, its overcurrent protection, its breaker. So the biggest thing to look at is there a breaker at the head of that circuit, first of all, because you do see it where there's not a main breaker for the house. So you look at the breakers, and if they've been recalled, that's probably the number one thing for us to fix.
Yeah.
So it really is a brand name. Federal Pacific is the big one. So if you ever see a Federal Pacific panel, the thing with the Federal Pacifics is they would go down a conveyor line and an inspector would look and say, these things will trip when they're supposed to trip. And then what they were doing at night is they were taking those 100 breakers, I'm making that number up, but they took those 100 breakers, put it at the head of the line again, and then those same breakers went down and passed, and everything was passing. It was amazing. This is a great product. So there's break. They got caught on that, and so now there are breakers out there that potentially won't trip. So I would say ultimately for us electrically, no matter what the wiring, no matter what the time period, wherever it is in the city, state, county, the biggest thing for you guys to look at is the how it's protected, meaning the breaker situation. So the Federal Pacific are on older homes. We can't install them anymore. There's no such thing as that anymore. So old is going to be, I believe they stopped letting us use those in the 80s. So if you see a home that's before, but you can still buy them at Salmon, so you'll still see them. Yeah. You'll still see them, but as a general course of construction, I'd say anything before the 80s has the potential to have Federal Pacific on it.
So,
Well, I'm going to move on, guys, because the next slide is questions, so feel free to ask away. I'll try and moderate a little bit. Yes, ma'am.